when you do all that work to build a brand that has so much texture to it and has this relevance at a certain time, that's the hardest thing, is to get to another place where it's not relevant anymore. And honestly, Nantucket Nectars is not a relevant brand the way it used to be. So that is the hardest part.
Welcome to Eating Glass. It's a podcast where in each episode, we ask startup founders the questions no one else will. Our goal? To reveal what it's actually like to start, scale, and exit a company. I'm Joe LeMay, and I bootstrapped my reusable notebook company, Rocketbook, to a $50 million exit.
And I am Will Nitza, founder and CEO at IQ Bar, a nutrition company I took from 0 to 40 plus million in annual revenue. For better or worse, we are your hosts. Eating Glass is sponsored by IQ Bar, which is my company, so be nice to it. What do we do here? We make IQ Bar plant protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe instant mushroom coffees, all of which are special because they are the only thing in their category that centers on nutrients good for your body, protein, electrolytes, things like that, as well as things that are good for your brain, so magnesium or lion's mane, to name a few. They are all delicious. Most functional foods and drinks taste like crap. Ours taste good, and taste matters. That is despite them being super low in sugar and super clean label. There's no weird stuff on our labels. And by the way, they're affordable. Functional stuff is usually price gougy, and we are not. I will not be offering a discount code. I will instead ask you a favor. Go to Amazon.com, search for IQ Bar, IQ Mix, IQ Joe, or some combination of the three. Find a non-sponsored listing, click on it, buy it, wait for it to arrive, and leave a review. And that is the only favor I will ever ask you. Thank you very much. Eating Glass is also sponsored by Ramp. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software that we at IQ Bar have used for 5 years now, I think. And I actually reached out to them about sponsoring, not the other way around. I love them for 3 reasons. Number 1, simplicity. Everyone on our team gets a physical and a digital card. Replacing cards, pausing cards, putting limits on cards, insanely easy. Setup takes 10 minutes. Number 2, cash back. 1.5% cash back. You don't have to deal with points. If you're messing around with points, you are wasting your time. Just get cash back. Number 3, they are better at categorizing spend. So we not only save money on the cashback side, we save time on closing our books because they're just better at classifying. They give us an incredible offer for you guys, $250 free when you sign up for Ramp today. Go to ramp.com/glass. That's ramp.com/glass. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, welcome, Tom, first to the Eating Glass podcast. It's awesome to have you.
Good to be here.
I'll start with true story. About a year ago, I woke up thirsty at night, and there was this juicy seltzer that my son bought, and it was just like sitting in the fridge and staring back at me. And I didn't want to drink it because it was my son's, but my cravings were hard, and I just kind of found myself writing a note to him saying, "Hey, sorry I drank your seltzer." And it was like the best drink. It's my favorite drink I've ever had. And I have in the past year probably bought, I don't know, close to $1,000 worth of your product, I gotta say. And I give it to all my guests and everything. And I'm obsessed with strawberry rhubarb, wild berry, and I got myself a ginger lemon right here.
That's my favorite one right there.
It's so good. It's just the balance is just perfect.
When my kids were little, my wife and I used to mix juice and seltzer, and we would call it Juicy Bubbly. So the kids would always ask for Juicy Bubbly, and I think eventually that actually became Culture Pop.
Will was pointing out it says soda on it. It's in the soda category, but it's got some juice in it, a little bit more than these seltzers out there. So it's not really a seltzer, but I kind of think of it as not quite a soda and also not quite a seltzer. I don't know how you think about it.
We're about to launch a campaign called the Indescribable Soda. I guess you're having trouble describing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're doing this campaign, because, I mean, I look at it as soda as a sweetened carbonated drink, which we are. We use organic juice to sweeten it. One of the challenges of the whole soda category and why it's been declining for a while is because, in some respects, a lot of calories, a lot of ingredients that you can't read, but people still want more flavor than a seltzer. I think a seltzer is a bit more of a functional drink. It's hydrating, and you can buy an 8-pack for $5 or whatever. So we were trying to create an experience that was certainly more than seltzer, but maybe change people's view of what soda is.
Just to get tactical, what is the definition of soda?
My definition is a sweetened carbonated drink.
Because, and this is another well, all three of us are Greater Boston guys, but Bill Creelman, of course, is not too far from you, the founder of Spindrift, right? And I guess you could it's a sweetened carbonated drink, but barely sweetened, right? Because he just uses fruit juice. So it's where's the threshold? Like, how sweet does it have to be? Because they would call themselves a seltzer, right?
I don't know if he actually even puts the word seltzer on it, because I think there is actually a definition of seltzer. Seltzer actually has some sort of definition, and it may be that it is not sweetened. I'll say, like, I think he's doing for the seltzer category, if you want to put him in that category, a similar thing that we're doing for the soda category. I think they really redefined an ingredient profile by using not from concentrate juice. And I think we see the same thing with people who have basically left the soda category for a bunch of different reasons that find Culture Pop, and they come back. We're bringing them into the category because it's a different drinking experience. It's a different sweetener experience. We're not adding like one of these high intensity sweeteners with an aftertaste or aspartame or 40 grams of sugar. One of the things I give Bill a lot of credit for is compounding growth for 20 years and building a beautiful brand with really high standards.
I have so many questions about Culture Pop, you can probably tell, but I'd like to back up a little bit and learn a little bit more about you. I mean, before we get into even Nantucket Nectars, I would ask, how would your friends and family describe you as a person?
Probably passionate about stuff, highly competitive, probably known by a lot of friends if I'm playing sports or whatever that I'm competitive. I dislike losing a lot. And I think like when I started Nantucket Nectars, my greatest fear was not being able to keep doing what I was doing. Like as a young 22-year-old doing something, I didn't want to give up. I just wanted to keep doing what I was doing. And I think that is a little bit what I'm like.
I think a lot of very competitive people get onto the prestige track. I mean, you definitely you went to Brown University. How did you decide to have what sounded like a really cool job in Nantucket? And can you tell us a little bit about that origin point?
I moved to Nantucket and joined a friend from Brown, Tom Scott, who had started the prior summer a boat business that delivered. It was like a floating 7-Eleven on the water for wealthy people in Nantucket Harbor, and we were delivering ice and newspapers and breakfast and fixing engines, basically anything that anyone would pay us for on the water. I joined him when we graduated from Brown, and we ran that business for a bunch of years and did all sorts of things. We did rescues, and I think we discovered the idea of like we weren't business people. We actually failed accounting, both of us at Brown. There was a challenge to creating new ideas and a business and pricing and waking up every day and not knowing sort of where it was going to start or where it was going to end. And I think we fell in love with that. We love Nantucket as well. I think one of the biggest gifts I ever had in my whole business career was that the original goal for starting Nantucket Nectars, which, just to finish the story, I had been in Spain with my girlfriend my senior year of college, and I discovered these juices in Europe. They made really good like nectar juices, and there was nothing like it really here. It was like during the times of very fine and Dole and Welch's and stuff, and these were like full body juices, and we started making fresh juice and selling it on the boat in the morning, and we called it Nantucket Nectars. And then, I mean, from there, we tried to figure out ways to produce it and distribute it and grew the company. But the goal of our boat business was called All Serve, and then we had Nantucket Nectars as well, and we were delivering stuff on the island. Tom's and my goal in building our company was to live on Nantucket and to run a business and to not write a resume and apply for a job. This was at a time when there was no Facebook or Google. I did not know that selling a business was something. I didn't even know that. The way I looked at starting Nantucket Nectars and running All Serve was that if I became successful, I could get a paycheck that was part of my business, and that would fulfill me for the rest of my life. So it wasn't about exiting and selling and making money. It never was that. I have never thought about building a business to become wealthy or to make money. And I've certainly wanted to be able to support a nice lifestyle and all that. And that came from the origins of the way that Tom and I started our business.
I'm trying to imagine you're on this boat and coming up with all of these ways to help your customers who have yachts and boats. And I mean, how was that in terms of your ability to learn about the nuts and the bolts of business, as well as, I imagine there was some great networking as well?
I would say the biggest thing I learned was how to sell. But I was riding around on a boat and I would go interact with adults. And yeah, a lot of them were wealthy people, and I would memorize the names of their boats and the type of boat they had and whether or not they had ever been here before. If they told me something about their family or some other tidbit, I would remember it. And I realized that connecting with these people as humans had value. And I mean, a lot of times, to be honest, I was looking for an extra $20 tip so I could have dinner that night. But I think one thing I discovered was that I was a good salesperson and I was confident, a confident conversationalist. And then when, I started building a business, I realized how valuable that was across everything I was doing, whether it was a customer or an investor or, you're a 24-year-old kid trying to buy glass from Vitro packaging in Mexico or whatever, and I'm on the phone in an ice house on Nantucket trying to convince someone to sell me glass. So that was the greatest thing that I learned from Allserve.
During that moment at AllServe, or even the early days of Nantucket Nectars, what kind of resistance did you get from the world, whether it was family or friends, or, what did you have to push through?
I mean, the early days of Nectars were really difficult. I wouldn't say that we were successful. I think our biggest resistance was that we didn't really know how to make a great product or packaging and what the impact of that was. We were figuring out things on the fly. We also weren't finance people, so we had to learn how to raise capital and find the people who could invest in the business. And we didn't grow up as product people. I mean, we didn't have any training, but we really wanted our product to be great because what we sort of saw early on is that we really didn't know how to make a great product or develop great packaging. And over those first couple of years, that was a huge challenge for us. The product didn't sell really well. We had to work it really hard. And then over the next period of time, I think we became great product people, packaging people, storytellers, and little things started working. And I think that when we saw those nuggets work, we doubled down on them and we found new ways to elevate what we were doing. And that was a great learning lesson for us in those early days of Nantucket Nectars.
You're actually the first person we've talked to. I think we've talked to 12 or so people by now. You're the first one who jumped right into entrepreneurship. I think this is a really interesting topic. Like often I'll talk with aspiring entrepreneurs and I'll say, go get a job, like learn on someone else's dime. And if you want to work in startups, okay, go work for a startup, but work for something where there's a couple levels of bureaucracy. They have to put together quarterly financials. You understand what it's like to have a boss. How do you make an Excel spreadsheet? How do you make a PowerPoint deck? Blah, 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 blah. And you do all that on their dime and then dive into the deep end. And I guess I do that because that's what I say that because that's what I did. And Joe had a multi-decade career before starting Rocketbook. And then you're this third permutation here and you dove right in. And I think it's interesting because there's like pluses and minuses to that, right? So you mentioned you were forced into sales. So you just had to learn how to sell. And then there's just this naivete. And not only did you not have experience, you didn't have CPG experience. So you had no food science experience. You had no product marketing experience. How do you view all of that? Like if you were to advise someone today, would you say, do what you did? Would you say, actually, we kind of succeeded in spite of that? It probably would have been good if we had a little bit of CPG experience. Like, where do you come down on that whole topic?
My answer is that I think it can, maybe by evidence of the three people that are talking right now, it can work in different ways. And there are different personalities that end up being really successful building, innovative businesses. There's some unbelievably technical, precise, but creative people who build things that definitely aren't like me. I mean, I wouldn't describe myself that way. And there are sort of wild thinking, brave, out there people who are unbelievably driven to get things right, even though they may not start in the right place, that end up being really successful. I think at one point, very early on, I thought like the people at Pepsi or Coke must be beverage geniuses. Like they know all the answers. Like they're the experts. They know how pricing works. They have the food science people, so they must be able to make the products that consumers want. And I think that the more that Tommy and I grew our business, the more we realized that that was, without any disrespect to people at Coke and Pepsi, that was entirely untrue. I think by the time we were 4 or 5 years in the business, we knew more than anyone who was at a larger company. We were doing everything. We were living and dying the pricing. We were living and dying the packaging. We were living and dying the flavor and the formulation, the sugar level, and reading. At that time, there were written letters constantly being sent to us. We read every one. They may not have made us singular experts on food science, but they gave us really three-dimensional understanding of our business and our industry, and if we were willing to listen and learn and change and be wrong, we had an opportunity to get better, and I think we did. We had many people early on, I mean, I'm dating myself by saying this, it said that we would never, ever sell a bottle of juice for $1. And at that time, we were insecure about it. I mean, honestly, within a couple years after that, when someone would tell us something like, "You'll never sell guava," my first thought was, "We're definitely coming out with guava because it's probably gonna be a really good seller." But for young people who are thinking about tackling an area where they see an opportunity for disruption or innovation, you do have an opportunity to become an expert in a field, and maybe even a greater expert than the people who've been doing it for 15 or 20 years, and there's a big incentive for people that have been doing something for a really long time not to change, to keep going down the same road, to keep producing plastic bottles at 2,700 bottles a minute with high fructose corn syrup that fits in a side loader, that gets there efficiently, that meets their logistics needs.
Yeah, it strikes me a lot of like humility is at the center of a lot of it. And humility is so useful when you have no experience. You're just inherently so humble and you're allowed to start at zero and operate on first principles. And so when someone says something like, "You'll never do that," it's just a dead giveaway that that person lacks humility because they think that they know the answer and they're just so often so wrong. And people at Pepsi, people at Coke, they just have a certain level of a lack of humility. They have to, right? Because they're working for the Goliath that has X amount in sales and they've done it for so long. And I think it's just so useful to have that like intense humility at the get-go. And arguably that supersedes all of the negatives inherent to a lack of expertise.
I also think, like, with a very large company, I mean, there is a big difference in what turns the dial. I mean, so people at really big companies, you could create something innovative, even if it were a $50 million opportunity. It's not going to turn the ship at a really big company. So it's a lot harder to see it as something that is worthwhile. And so, in defense of people at Coke or Pepsi, like that's not what they're for. And that is, frankly, what we're for. And so it is the job of innovators to get to that first 100 or couple 100 million where something could actually be an opportunity for a big company.
When you started, did you kind of know where you were going? How did you know point by point that you were on the right path? And when you were encountering obstacle after obstacle, how did you keep going?
Tom and I ran the company for about 14 years. And for the first 5 years, all I was thinking about was having a business that would fulfill our lives in some ways. And as people joined the company, also to fulfill their lives, and that we could keep it going. The more we learned about the industry and the more that we got distribution and we were competing with other products on the shelf and kind of getting known in the marketplace, the more I wanted the brand to perform. And a lot of that was people loving the product, making something beautiful and great and tasty. It was probably about year 5 where I saw, or both of us saw this as a real opportunity to build a national brand. I think early on it's like, oh, we've got this nice New England brand, and oh, it sells in New York a little bit, and it sells in Washington, D.C., where Tom lived. And then all of a sudden, like, wow, we have something really different. I think one of the first things we saw was like 1992 or 3 when Snapple started really growing. We're like, wow, I think there's probably like a little bit of jealousy. Like they got really big really quickly, and we just thought we had a better product. So it was like, how can this, I mean, Snapple's really drinkable and good iced tea, but we have a really beautiful product. Let's go compete with these guys.
Were you in the few $1 million range at that point?
Yeah, we were probably a couple million in revenue, and they got bought by Quaker Oats. It was actually a disaster for them and an opportunity for us because Quaker Oats made a lot of enemies with their distributors, and then distributors were calling us and like looking for another brand to be in their house. So that became a big opportunity for us. So it was funny because what we saw is like, oh my God, they got bought by Quaker Oats. They're going to be huge and we're going to get left in the dust. Actually turned out to be a huge opportunity for us and was a bit of a launching pad. We were then trying to figure out like, how do we tell our story? How do we get the word out about this brand? How do you describe it? We were at a food show or a trade show somewhere. Of course, it was just the two of us, running the table or booth or whatever. And somebody comes walking up to the table and says, "Hey, I know the founders of this company." And the two of us are like, "Oh, really? Like, how do you know them?" And they're like, "Oh, well, there are these two brothers named Mike who went to Duke." And so both of us are like, who names two of their kids Mike? That doesn't make any sense. That's an odd comment. And so we were laughing about it later, but I think one of the things we thought about was there's a story about Nantucket Nectars that these two guys started it. That's kind of interesting. This person cares, or maybe that story is traveling. And we started to hear a lot about that. And I think certainly back then, and it probably doesn't, so many people do it now, it's probably a lot harder, but I think it was a little bit of the impetus to tell the Tom and Tom story way back when, which, a lot of people watching this podcast never heard our radio ads or don't remember. But, there was Ben and Jerry and there was Jim Cook. And then there was a period where, Tom and Tom were a really big story in the food world. And, kids weren't graduating from college and starting food companies back then. They were, and certainly like by the mid 90s, like everyone was going into technology and we were like the idiots who had inventory and receivables. Like, why would you possibly have inventory and receivables if you could start a technology company? We started to tell the story of, these two guys that started a juice company on Nantucket and that we really cared about the way we made the product. And our line was, we're juice guys. And we started to do a bunch of radio ads and billboard and everything and tell the Tom and Tom story and tell the Nantucket Nectar story. And that was as impactful as anything we ever did, was like backing up a really beautifully packaged product with great storytelling.
So I want to get your take on, if you had to distill why Nantucket Nectars won, what were the 3 or 4 distinct things? But it strikes me that was very much one of them, which was, it's such an iconic brand because it's so authentic and like almost folksy and also very regional, which gives people a sense, oh, this is local. Like, I know a guy like Tom and Tom sounds like your neighbors, right? It's so incredibly relatable. And it's great you mentioned Ben and Jerry's because I had the exact same thought. I'm like, Ben and Jerry's, it's so centric to Vermont and it's these two guys and they kind of feel like your neighbors. And ice cream's so relatable, just like juice is so relatable. So there's so many parallels there, but they're just in a category that had Tropicana and all these other Goliaths. It was Tom and Tom. And it's like, I'd much rather buy juice made from Tom and Tom. And it went all the way down to the packaging. It's in a glass bottle. You use cane sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup. There's so many things that help you in that authenticity story. It strikes me that that is like one of the pillars. Was it? And then what are the other pillars of why you guys won?
There were many other things, and what I would say is, I always say, like, a business is a collection of decisions that you make. That's what it is. And as you were describing Nantucket Nectars, I think about really nuanced decisions that we made that you pointed out a couple of them, like there might have been thousands, but on our packaging, we didn't have any typography, actual typography from a computer. They were all illustrated by an artist. Every letter was illustrated by an artist. We chose not to use typography from a computer because we thought, you said it was, you used the word folksy. It was little teeny decisions like that, which collectively made it real and folksy, authentic, and that we thought like a big company or a different company wouldn't choose to make that decision because it's a little bit harder, more work to get it done. We had to go through every stupid letter and make sure we liked the way it was shaped. And
Even down to the name, Nantucket Nectars, you don't see that. You don't see people putting a location in a brand name. That doesn't happen often at all. And so it just gives you the sense, oh, Nantucket, it must just be these couple guys in Nantucket. Even after you scale to DC and nationally, you still get that regional feel.
and it's funny because early on at Nectars, there were people that would tell us that the product didn't sell very well because it was regional and no one wanted a product from Nantucket in Los Angeles or something like that. But I agree with you. I think that one of our great distributors, big guys, are and Hal Irving, who God rest his soul, he used to say, nobody cares what Nantucket is. No one even knows what Nantucket is. He said Nantucket is paradise. That's what he used to say. And that's sort of your point, is that even if someone didn't know what it was, it meant something to them. And that's what H used to always say. But yeah, all those little pieces, and that is a huge part of building a business, is paying attention to little details that you think, maybe let's just do this, it won't really matter. But those things do matter when you add them all up. I think both Tom and I were really proud of when we were building the business, and we found really difficult when we sold it. When we sold the business, we watched Cadbury or Dr. Pepper or whatever sort of undo one by one all these little things that I'm sure they thought didn't matter, and they really did matter.
Often the things that got me really excited about what we would make a decision on or make an investment in, sometimes if I just thought that, hey, the incumbents could never pull this off or could never do it, it got me excited, but it also was like a point where I could go back to my co-founder or my team and get them excited, because I was like, hey, we got to do this because there's no way that incumbent can do it. And so let's do it, right? And it'll be completely novel. Was that an energizing force for you, or what was an energizing force for you? Because, like you said, each little micro decision, you decided to make decisions that were not the easy way. Like, what was the thing that gave you the extra energy to do everything on a little bit of hard mode so that you could stand out?
Wanting to be proud of every element of your product for the consumer. So within the framework of what you're trying to build, how do you build something that you're incredibly proud of, and your most ardent critic would look at your product, examine it, read your ingredient statement, and you'd be really proud to walk them through every element of it. And I think that's a little bit what Tom and I felt at Nectars, is we wanted to be really proud of what we had created, and we wanted, with a really critical consumer, to feel great about what we made. And honestly, in building Culture Pop, that was one of my biggest driving forces, is that I wanted a really discerning consumer to read my ingredient statement, to taste the product, to examine it and see it the way I did and love it the way I do. We hear stories a lot with Culture Pop where a mom and a dad or whatever and a kid are walking through a store, and the kid grabs a Culture Pop because it's brightly colored and cool packaging, and the mom takes it out of the kid's hand, reads the ingredient panel, and hands it back to their child. And when I was building the product, that I was thinking about that. You build a product that you're really proud of, that will stand the test of time and still is able to meet the needs of the consumer, pricing, size, positioning, occasion, all those things.
Just to tie a bow on the Nectars story, why did you exit? And walk us through that entire process, right? Because you said, you didn't get into this to make money and you just wanted to build a business and create a great job for yourself, create something people love. So why'd you sell the business? How did you know it was time? And how did things change for you psychologically, literally, lifestyle wise when you sold it?
There wasn't huge pressure from investors to sell, but I think that there was an idea that at some point we would sell the business. I think more than anything else, there was a little bit of fatigue. Tom and I had been running it for almost 15 years. It went from being entrepreneurial, freewheeling company with a bunch of 25-year-olds running around doing things to, $100 million plus business with 160 employees. And it wasn't like running the small business that we had run. And then we had never done anything else, either of us, professionally in our lives. We graduated from college and this is all we had ever done. And so there was probably a little bit of curiosity about what are the other things that we could do in our life, either creatively, entrepreneurially, professionally. I know for one, Tom wanted to do different things and he's an unbelievably creative, anyone who knows Tommy, creative, driven, curious person. I really think he wanted to stretch his brain a little bit more into different areas that he was interested in, did a lot of creative work in film and movies and TV and whatever, which he's loved. The last thing I'd say is we were a little concerned about sugar. Juice was a hard category to navigate away from 50 grams of sugar and 200 and something calories, really hard. And we weren't going to make juice with an artificial sweetener in it. And we were hearing a lot about consumers being concerned about calories. So there was might have been a little fear there that we had gotten to a place where it might be harder to continue to grow the business. So that was really the driver. It was hard. I mean, I will tell you, there's a little part of me that still has never, will never recover from having sold your child, and the partnership that we had with all of the young people, their first job ever, that were our really good friends that went off in different directions when we sold the business. That was really, really hard. People built their careers there. They were a huge part of building that company and brand, and it was hard to see it end.
How did it end? How did I listened to Tom Scott's interview. I forget with who, but he was talking about there were 7 interested parties.
What originally happened was in 98, we sold part of the business to Ocean Spray. And so Ocean Spray and Tom were partners. And that lasted about 4 years.
Was that inbound though? Did they just call you up one day and said, "Hey, I'd like your business"?
We got approached by Nelson Peltz, who was at Triarch. They own Snapple. And he asked us if we wanted to sell the business, and we said no. And then someone leaked it to the media that we had been speaking to Triarch or Snapple. When it was leaked, literally 50 companies called us to see if the business was on the market. And we saw that as an opportunity to grow our business. So we talked to Coke and Pepsi and Ocean Spray and Welch's and Dole's and Seagram's and Starbucks. And we were talking to everybody. And it turned out that Ocean Spray was a Massachusetts company. They were juice guys also. They were going to let us run the business ourselves. It seemed like a great opportunity for us to drive the ship and work with a local company, someone who knew the grocery space really well. We ended up doing a deal with Ocean Spray. We doubled the business the first year after the Ocean Spray deal closed. And then the cranberry market cratered, and the CEO and COO and everyone who did the deal at Ocean Spray was fired by the board, and they brought in a turnaround guy from Purina. Within 2 years, the guy decided he wanted to sell Nantucket Nectars, and he ran an auction. And in the auction was Cadbury, Schweppes, Pepsi, and Coke. Those were the 3 finalists, and Cadbury, which is now Keurig Dr. Pepper, ended up, buying the business.
It was 70 million the first time, and then they sold it for something like 100 or something over 100.
It was like 80 million valuation the first time. Tommy and I sold a little bit of our equity, and then it was more than that the second time when we fully exited.
Do you regret selling it at that time, or even in hindsight, do you think that was the right path for you?
I don't really regret it. I mean, there are parts of it that I regret. I'm a generally happy person, and I think it was the right time in my life, and I've done a bunch of other things, so I might not draw it up exactly the same way again, but you can't complain.
What are some things that maybe you wish you had foreseen that you could have prevented?
When we were growing the business, like the sort of private equity venture world was just beginning, it didn't really exist. And so a lot of our opportunities seemed to be much more strategic than sort of differentiated capital opportunities. We got the business to almost 100 million in revenue. It's really hard to get to where we got to. And, in today's terms, I don't know, that might equate to like 300 million in revenue in today's dollars. And I think founders, when you get some scale, like there are a bunch of different options you have. Even if you don't want to run the business yourself, you can figure out a way to not necessarily sell to strategic. There are good opportunities to raise more capital, to hire a CEO, to be a part of your business and maybe try to keep it semi-private for a period of time. There's a lot of different ways that if you can script it out for yourself and say, like, would this be possible? This would be an ideal outcome. I'm going to still, kind of run my business. Maybe I'll be CEO or chairman of the board and have a CEO and hold on to some equity and have some control over the future of this brand that I built that I'm so proud of, rather than just handing it off to someone who's going to destroy it. That's my greatest regret. It's really hard to look at Nantucket Nectars in a plastic bottle.
I can feel that a little bit too. I think, I'm now no longer have anything to do with Rocketbook. I would love to see it do amazing things. I still feel an association with it. I have a real affinity with, the team, and seeing a lot of the team disperse and go on to do different things was one of the hardest things I had. But there's also part of me when I see problems come up, I'm I'm a little bit like, okay, that's not my problem anymore, right? Um, does it still affect you emotionally to see them make decisions that you wouldn't like, or are you able to just kind of move on and separate yourself from the brand that used to be associated so strongly with you?
I have separated myself, but yeah, it's hard. It was such a beautiful brand. And so when you do all that work to build a brand that has so much texture to it and has this relevance at a certain time, that's the hardest thing, is to get to another place where it's not relevant anymore. And honestly, Nantucket Nectars is not a relevant brand the way it used to be. So that is the hardest part.
Hey, something I'm curious for us to discuss as well is the idea of partnerships and co-founders. Very curious to hear you compare and contrast, and how have your thoughts on having a founder or solo founding, how has that evolved over time?
I look at Nantucket Nectars as kind of like a 1 in a million experience. Two guys that were like good friends in college that started a business together. Seems like high risk, right? Particularly two people who are really different. I mean, we were very different. The greatest thing that we had in common was our admiration and trust of each other. I think we respected each other. And that doesn't mean lack of disagreement, despite things that can be really hard, or people's lives are different. They have different things going on in their lives. I mean, your personal lives have to be distinct from your business life, and that can make things challenging, certainly over a 14-year period of building a business where one person's engaged and getting married, or some person doesn't want to live in this place or that place. I mean, there's all these things, but if you still love and respect each other, you get a great opportunity. I mean, I'm in a situation now where I'm a solo founder. I, founded this alone. I really do look at the people in some of the team members in my business who are shareholders as incredibly close to co-founders with me, and I could not possibly do this without them. And sort of in that, trying to find that similar yin and yang that Tom and I had, where, you know, I was always at Nectar's, I was definitely the heads down blocker and tackler. I mean, that's, I'm like going after something with a vengeance. And Tommy was dreaming of things that seemed crazy or impossible. That made us do things that we never would have done if it had just been me.
Yeah, I think about it actually the same way you do. Like, you need to work backwards from that yin and that yang. And it's just a question of how you achieve the yin and the yang. And one way of achieving it is through a co-founder. Another way, like you said, with your current situation, can be through other stakeholders, investors, board members, what have you. But you need to achieve that somehow. One thing I know to me is consistent across all people who had beautiful co-founder, marriages, quote unquote, is that they say, man, I feel so lucky I found that person. They always say that. You just said it was once in a million. Joe has said before, he was so lucky he found Jake. And so my perspective is, I can't count on getting really, really lucky. And so my perspective is, I'm going to create an analog for that co-founder experience via stakeholders. So both can work. It's just, can you find your path into a great co-founder relationship, and are you going to get lucky? But okay, let's get post Nantucket Nectars. Let's get closer to current day. Well, so let's span the time from Nectars to current day. One thing that you're unique in from the other folks we talked to is you've lived so many lives. Like, you did Nectars out of college. You then were the CEO of a company called 11 Technologies. You're the owner of an independent natural food store. You're the chairman of a water company called O Water. You started a beverage consultancy. You started a venture fund. You were the operating partner for one financial institution. You're now the operating partner for another. And then 31 years after starting Nantucket Nectars, you've come full circle. It's this like beautiful full circle thing, and you're back in RTD. Walk us through just like all of that. Like, why did you do all of those different things? And then why did you circle back to that original love of RTD beverage?
First of all, I'll say started a couple businesses after we sold Nantucket Nectars, mostly because of the love of building something and creating something. I think Nantucket Nectars partially came out of like a love of food and cooking and the craft of it, which I think I had as a kid. My wife and I bought this store, and we had our own, butcher shop and wine shop and everything. And that was sort of an extension of a similar passion that was the original passion for creating Nantucket Nectars. There's a little bit of me that regrets starting so many things right after Nectars. I think it would have been healthy to take a bit of a break. I'm not sure I'm capable of that, but looking back on it, it might have been good to have taken it a couple years. I ended up joining a guy named Bill Anderson, his family had been our first distributors in California for Nantucket Nectars, who started First Beverage Group. I was not the founder, and I became the managing partner of a very small venture fund to invest in the beverage industry. I was always interested in that world, having dealt with people on the other end of it. And I thought that it was an opportunity to see more of the industry than I had seen, being sort of a sole brand founder and leader. So I was at First Beverage for 5 years, worked with a lot of different amazing people, and loved it for the reasons that I expected to love it, like learning a lot about different types of companies at different sizes. But ultimately, it's the fight to build something great and build a beautiful product and a great business and all that comes along with that, and go on a ride with a group of people. And so I think I wanted that again. I had this idea to take on the largest category in all of beverage. I felt like it was the one category where younger consumers had not gotten a solution. People who were looking for better ingredients, but like there wasn't something in carbonated soft drinks that every brand I looked at, it was like, oh, there's all these like specialty sodas. they're pretty much the same product in a pretty glass bottle with really nice packaging. Like, can't someone do something which really is differentiated that brings taste experience, a functionality that a lot of other categories have done?
Seems quite different, Nantucket Nectars, it was your trip to Spain, you tried a juice, you saw it, you're like, "This is amazing, let's bring something like that back." But it sounds almost more strategic. Did you really kinda look back at the industry with all of your experience and kind of see some holes in the market and then think of an idea? Or was there more of a eureka style moment? Help me understand how the culture pop, you know, pop happened.
There was an actual moment. So I'm out to dinner with my family, my 3 kids and my wife, and the waiter came over to the table and asked my kids if they, "Do you guys want drinks?" and whatever, and he said, "Oh, our bartender makes these great mocktails. Would you like mocktail?" And so my kids have been kids that have never ordered off a children's menu in their life and whatever, so he's like, "I'm gonna get you 3 mocktails. I'm gonna just tell the bartender, they're great, you're gonna love them." So he made 3 different ones for my 3 kids. I was, like, barely paying attention to that until the drinks landed on the table, and he brings over these 3 carbonated soft drinks, and there was some juice in it, and then it was literally, like, cut herbs and spices. It was like you could see chopped rosemary in the drink, or thyme, or lavender, or whatever. In each of them had a different one, but I was sitting there staring at their glasses, and I was, like, shaking my head. I'm thinking, I cannot believe that no one has done this. This is where carbonated soft drinks started. This was the beginning. They were in a pharmacy. They were health tonics. They were meant for wellness. They used ginger and herbs and juice to heal people's stomachs. And look at them now. And so I was staring at it, and I actually brought it up at the table, which might have been, of course, like, I'm thinking about the beverage industry. We're having a nice family dinner, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And my first investor, Brian, who's one of the partners at Castanea, I probably brought it up to him, like, it was constantly in my head. I brought it up to him 2 years later, and he's like, "That's a great idea. You really should do that. You should do it."
And had Olipop and Poppy been gained some traction, and where you're like, was that validation that then you were onto the right path here?
So when I was at First Beverage, Olipop was Obi, and we met with them. I thought it was really interesting, Obi, and they were making a probiotic soda. I really thought that was a good idea. I was always thinking, like, if it's outwardly just marketed as a, like, someone's not gonna buy something that screams probiotic soda at you. And then it became Olipop, and I was talking to those guys, and yeah, it was validation. I think Olipop is beautiful packaging. They've done an incredible job, but it was formulated very differently than what I was thinking of. I'm not a sweetener fan, and I really wanted to make something without stevia or erythritol or aspartame, where, again, going back to, like, reading that ingredient panel and being incredibly proud of every element of it, I wanted to make a really special soda that was very simple ingredients that had layers of flavor and sort of was a healthy tonic. It had health benefits to it. And then, I mean, the next thing was, like, you've gotta build something that is not so precious that it only sells in the natural channel. Like, this has gotta sell really well in Whole Foods, and it's gotta sell really well in Walmart.
And the no sweetener thing, by the way, is quite contrarian. It may not sound contrarian, but it is, right? I mean, just look at all of the biggest beverage companies. Celsius, right, uses sucralose. The entire energy category, that's all massive, all uses sweeteners. Listening to it, it's like, yeah, of course, that's nice, but it is actually still pretty contrarian to be that clean label.
I agree. I think that the American consumer, a lot of them do want something super sweet. I think that it's moving in the other direction, but I also think that people oftentimes don't have a choice. I mean, it's either seltzer or something that is unbelievably sweet with monk fruit or stevia or whatever in it, and they're accepting that taste of stevia or monk fruit, but not an ideal taste profile. But it certainly works to make something super sweet.
And you can win at a big scale by taking your tack, right? Like Spindrift is a great example of that. Before them, Honest Tea was a great example. That was the entire premise of Honest Tea was Snapple, but way less sweet.
Yeah.
And that's it has a less addictive quality to it. It just does. Like we get addicted to sweetness, and yet was very successful. Sadly, Coke added more and more sugar, and then discontinued the whole frickin' thing. But that's another story. But just so you're at the center of this very interesting storm of better for you soda right now. I think the rise of Olipop and I would say even more so Poppy has taken a lot of people by surprise. Maybe not you, but certainly has taken me by surprise when Olipop was raising these giant rounds, and I was like, whoa, all these people seem to be way overpaying. These guys are losing a ton of money. Are they really going to eat that much market share from Coke and Pepsi? And then they did. Just give us like a commentary on soda writ large, both traditional soda and better for you. How much of a thing is better for you going to become, in your opinion? And then where will Culture Pop fit in there, right? Is your goal, all right, we want to become a Keurig Dr. Pepper to the Pepsi and Coke of Olipop and Poppy? No, we're gonna be bigger than them. Like, just give us the full spectrum of the space.
Between us and Poppy and Olipop and probably a couple other brands in the future, this is the new carbonated soft drink category. I think Gen Z and millennials have been looking for a solution in this category, and we are it. I also think that there's gonna have to be multiple solutions to make it a huge category, and to answer your question about how Culture Pop fits in, people probably thought Red Bull would always be 98% of the category or something like that, and there'd never be anyone else, and along came Monster, and I'm sure that people thought for the next 10 years that it'd be a 2-brand category with Monster and Red Bull. You know, if you'd asked me if Celsius would do what they done 5 years ago or anyone else, no one would believe you, or C4 or Ghost or whatever. So the energy category is on fire because there are a lot of brands that have spoken somewhat differently to different consumers looking for different solutions. And there will be more. And that's how you build a really big category. So I think Poppy and Olipop have done an incredible job. They've invested a lot of money to build this category. Clearly, they're a good solution for certain customers, and we're seeing the same thing with Culture Pop, is that we are a beloved brand. Consumers love our product, and we're a solution for sometimes it's a different occasion, or sometimes it might be a different consumer. There's actually quite a bit of crossover. We've done a lot of work on this. Like, we're refreshing and very drinkable. You could have 2 or 3 Culture Pops a day. I don't know if you drink, 3 sweet root beers a day, but you would drink a couple of Culture Pops a day. And that is critically important to building a really big sector. And if you look at all of, traditional carbonated soft drinks, how many brands are there? How many flavors are there? How many different types of products are there that provide solutions to make that category the biggest category in all of beverage? And I think the same will be true of functional soda or modern soda over the next 10 years. You're going to have differentiated products and differentiated brands that bring the next generation back into carbonated soft drinks.
Let's fast forward to just a couple months ago. You raised a Series B. You raised $21 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you raised $21 million from Howard Schultz's firm. My first thought when I read that was, this is so interesting because it's a different era. You're building Culture Pop in relative to Nantucket Nectars, where I believe you only raised $2 million. And so we've talked about all the ways that are similar, the way you think about packaging, the way you market, et cetera. But you're fundamentally very different from Nantucket Nectars in that this is just a different game. And the most obvious piece is you're going to need a lot more cash, apparently. I guess first walk us through the Howard Schultz thing, and then just walk us through how the era is different and what it takes to win now is so different from what it took to win with Nantucket Nectars, and break those variables down.
These are expensive companies to build. a lot of working capital, the amount of money that people spend on marketing to just reach consumers. Nectar's was very much an up and down the street business. We were independent channel, DSD distributed, didn't do much grocery, did convenience. I don't even remember whether we ever paid a slotting fee in the history of the company. But these are much more expensive companies to build than they were back then. And so, the big goal of this capital raise was to really start to dial up the storytelling and marketing, which we haven't done a lot of. Like I really established the company the first 3 or 4 years, and the goal was get distribution, get it on the shelf, execute at retail, and prove that the stuff sells and that consumers love the product, and then make sure if there are things we have to refine in terms of how we make the product or flavors or packaging or whatever, we get that right before we really start to go big. In some respects, I slightly regret going as slowly as I did, given the head start that some of the competitors have had, but we've performed really, really well, and I'm happy with the brand that we've built. We actually steep spices into our juice blend, which is in developing our flavors, it's not easy to do, and especially when you're scaling up from doing 2,000 gallon batches to 50,000 gallon batches, like getting that right was really important for us because we don't make soda like anyone else has ever made it before. But yeah, this money is going to be invested in really telling our story, differentiating the product, winning with social. It requires capital. I mean, a lot of the brands in the beverage industry to get to 100 million plus are raising anywhere from 30 to $80 million or more. I think Poppy and Olipop have raised, I don't know, 150 million each or so, and have done really well. Yeah, there were people that a couple years ago said these guys are crazy, they're burning tons of capital, they have terrible gross margin, whatever they said, and they proved them wrong.
Does their fundraising success, distribution success actually pave some paths for you so you can draft off of them a little bit? Do buyers at grocery say, yeah, we do want to introduce another one. We see this as a big category. Does that help you that they even have a head start? And then a consumer like me comes along and just says, I see it on the shelf, I try it, and I'm like, oh, this is mine, right? So I could see them creating a condition where it's really helpful for you because, buyers open up shelves or create a category for you.
I mean, the category is doing extremely well. And when you go in and speak to buyers, they will say this is the fastest growing category in the beverage industry. And we are creating more space for it. And a lot of buyers are, when the category started, they almost didn't know where to put these products. So sometimes it ended up in the water set or specialty soda or something like that. And now, honestly, it's being moved into the traditional soda set, with a lot of retailers. So it tells you what the perception of this category is and what people think the opportunity is here. And yes, I think there is awareness for this category, whether it's on social or at retail, people are going to that spot. And people may discover the category through a different brand, but they end up trying Culture Pop and realize that it's got a differentiated ingredient positioning and flavor profile, and they love the product and brand. And I think there's a lot of it's not either or, but it's and there's an occasion to drink a Poppy or a Olipop, and there's an occasion to drink a Culture Pop. We're probably challenging products with a bunch of preservative in it, or an artificial sweetener, or 56 grams of sugar. So we all have a lot of work to do.
I changed my attitude on early category competition with Rocketbook. If you put a Rocketbook on a shelf in Staples, or a lot of them on shelves in Staples, it would sell fine. But then when they made an end cap that had all of our competitors and we were part of that, we sold 3 times as many.
Yeah.
Because the consumer is walking along and they're like, oh, I guess this is a category now. There's multiple. Now I just need to choose one of it.
Music to my ears.
Should we get into rapid fire?
Let's do it. Why don't you start, Will?
There's this question we always ask every guest. It's a Peter Thiel quote, which is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
I don't think growth or speed of growth is a predictor of success. I think a lot of people see success as like getting more sales, getting the next customer. And for me, it's each individual point of success and whether it's real.
You started Nantucket Nectars in a era where, for example, consumer VC did not exist, more or less. It was not a thing. It then became very much a big thing, and now it's kind of like somewhere in between. But as the financial institution dollars pour into consumer goods, the very logical next step is growth. It has to grow, and it has to grow very fast for these financial institutions' models to just even work in the first place. But I agree with you. Like, look at all the best consumer brands. They grew pretty darn slow. All the European luxury brands are 100 plus years old, right? And they're the biggest, best, most profitable brands globally. So the natural order is actually much slower growth. And we've just been introduced to these artificially high growth expectations, I think largely because so many dollars have flown into the space.
I think a lot of times companies or brands, you're doing all this work to create the moment where things start going. And sometimes trying to force that by like jamming sales through the system before it's ready can be actually counterproductive. So it is a balancing act. Obviously, you have to grow.
What are some commonly cited platitudes about what it takes for a startup to win that are just plain wrong? We all know there's conventional wisdom bandied about all the time, and everyone's a guru. What do you think is just plain wrong? That's advice that's often given to entrepreneurs.
I think exit thinking is a huge trap, and I think that it's in our culture today. Building a business is about the end and not the beginning. That's not like someone that it's not in a single bit of guidance that anyone's giving you, but it's in a lot of the pieces of guidance that they're giving you, that it is about building a business is about the exit.
All right, you built a lot of teams, and you've also been a part of a lot of teams. What are the absolute most important considerations for developing an A-plus team, in your opinion?
I look for people who have high expectations. If you don't have high expectations of what you're gonna get done there, then the value of all the effort to get there is like 50% of what you actually got. And that extends to everything that everyone does. And when I meet people that I can just tell they have high standards, they have high expectations, that's someone I want on my team.
All right, if you were a product, what would certain people dislike about you as a product?
Highly competitive.
What's been your single biggest mistake across anything? Maybe you regret opening that store. Maybe it was something at Nantucket Nectars. Like, what's just one thing you want to take back?
My biggest regret is probably starting a business as quickly as I did after Nectars. It was such an intense experience for almost 15 years, and I think it's, maybe this is guidance for Joe a little bit, but having some time to really understand what you want and what success looks like and what you value coming out of an experience, I think it really does take time. And I think I also believed coming out of Nectars that it would be a lot easier to be successful again, because I had nothing but success as a 20 whatever year old. A little bit of time and maturity would have helped me.
What's the single hardest decision you ever had to make along the way?
Tom and I, during Nantucket Nectars, we were both distributors and brand creators. We had a very large distribution company in Boston and in Washington, D.C. We were Arizona distributors as well, Arizona iced tea distributors. We had like 100 people in our distributorship in Boston and maybe another 30 in DC. And we were bleeding. It was going to bring us down. And in one day, we laid off 50 people. That was the hardest day I ever remember in my career. A lot of these people were so passionate about Nantucket Nectars and were such a part of like the building of it. And we were at a life or death moment.
How did building a startup affect your personal life? Positively, negatively? How did it change you as a person? What did you lose in the process, and was it worth it?
The greatest thing that comes out of building a company is the first moments of success where things work. It changed me as a person. It made me believe that using my brain and being creative could work. On the negative side, these, for me, I mean, I know it's true for a lot of people, it is all encompassing. There are no days off. There are no nights off. Hopefully, you can figure out a way to balance things. The older I've gotten, the better I've gotten. But I was not great when I was younger.
That dovetails with the growth thing, right? If you don't feel you have to grow 100+%, that's got to be liberating. For me personally, I'm on the other side of that, and I'm like, I do need to grow 100%. And yeah, you can never switch off. If you have such artificially high growth expectations, you can never switch off.
When you build a team, as a founder, you really feel accountable to every single person and their lives. I mean, you're paying mortgages and tuitions and healthcare, and like people are relying on you to make decisions that are supporting a lot of people's lives. And then the other thing is like people love being on this ride. They've chosen to be at your company. Everyone wants it to be successful, but as the founder, you kind of feel accountable to everybody. I take that really seriously, and when you're on a great ride, you love your team, and we all love each other, and I want it to work out, and that is a lot of pressure.
Next question is, how do you define success today compared to the early days?
I think define it the same way. Tommy and I wanted nothing more than to build a product that we were really proud of. It's about building a beautiful product with beautiful packaging that communicates emotionally to someone where they respond to it and it becomes a part of their lives. And honestly, that is the most important thing to me. I want to be really proud of what we make, every element of it, every ingredient, how we build the company. When times are tough or challenging, or when it's high growth and it's emotional and you're battling with all sorts of things, in my head, I always look back and I'm like, this is a great product and a beautiful brand. And that's why, we've got so much going on, and that's why building a business is challenging. It's because of that.
Well, I think that's it. That's the pod. Tom, that was awesome. Thanks so much for sharing.
Great questions. Enjoyed doing it as well.
Thanks for coming on.
All right.
Take care, Tom.
Yep. Take care. Good to see you guys.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening, and thank you to our sponsors, IQ Bar. Go to Amazon.com, search for IQ Bar, buy one, wait for it to arrive, leave a review. Please leave a review. Reviews are massive. Our second sponsor is Ramp. Go to ramp.com/glass. They give you $250 for free when you sign up. It's the best credit card / spend management software there is. Use it for years. Love it. If you like the podcast in general, subscribe, review it, tell a couple friends, tell your mom, and tune in a couple weeks. Talk to you then.